Hey everyone, Kevin here. Doesn't it seem ironic that bailouts could lead to bankruptcies? Well, in today's video, I'm gonna break down exactly why I believe the business bailouts we're seeing might end up being a very thick, double-edged sword. And we might, in other words, see a lot more bankruptcies from businesses down the road, as instead of having a V or U-shaped recovery, we end up with a double dip, W-shaped recovery. In other words, we might see another deep crash. And here's why. It all starts with business bankruptcies. Now look, initially when we think of business bankruptcies, we're thinking about employees, and this makes sense, right? We see articles like this or cover headlines. At least 16.7 million Americans lose their jobs in 21 days. That's the New York Times. It's terrifying. Millions out of work. USA Today, unemployment hits 17 million. All right, I guess they're rounding. Pain grows as jobless tally keeps rising. LA Times. Heck, you've even got the Wall Street Journal publishing articles like this. And of course, what most of us do is say, well, I mean, that's expected right now. But at least we have unemployment benefits for people losing their jobs or getting furloughed, and at least we have bailout programs for businesses. Well, the Financial Times today really got me thinking about those bailout programs for businesses. See, the Financial Times writes this article, Wall Street urges caution as bullish investors rush into recovery bets. And they kind of signal this concern that, wait a minute, be careful, we don't yet know what all of the corporate shocks are going to be, especially related to corporate bankruptcies. Which makes sense, because most small businesses, most retail stores, most restaurants, and pretty much every business on Main Street has virtually closed its doors. This is leading companies like the Cheesecake Factory not to pay rent, large gyms aren't paying rent, AMC, the movie theater chain, has hired bankruptcy attorneys, and the airlines are probably the next to line up with bankruptcy attorneys. And yet, we keep telling ourselves, no, it's okay, it's okay. Why is it okay? Because Jerome Powell's at the Fed going, printing some money. The problem is, in the United States, we're not actually seeing that money. Stimulus checks have taken long enough to get to folks, and we're just now starting to see $1,200 in stimulus. New York and Texas have delayed the $600 in unemployment benefits from the Fed because they just can't process all the applications, and many other states are following in those footsteps as well. And these small business loans, most people haven't seen a dime from small business bailout loans yet. But what does the Fed say? Don't worry. The money is here. We're printing money. Yet it's been 30 days since Donald Trump has issued his national emergency declaration, and most businesses still don't have money. Every business seems to be lost between all these acronyms, like EIDL grants, where businesses were promised, including small businesses like individual sole proprietors, $10,000 within 3 days if you fill out a form. Yet then that, because of overwhelming demand, turned into $1,000 for each employee when we get to it. Oh, but don't worry. We have family first credits, like paid leave that employers are somehow supposed to afford for their employees. And we have grants. Oh, wait, no, we don't have those because those are caught up in the EIDL. Oh, but don't worry. We have employee retention credits, and you can defer paying your taxes. And we have SBA Express loans, and we have the PPP. Yet all of these things are so incredibly complicated and confusing that there's no wonder it's been 30 days since this disaster declaration and businesses aren't able to stay afloat. In fact, over 40% have completely closed down. And as if all this confusion weren't bad enough, the Federal Reserve just came out on Thursday and said, you know what? We need another program. How about Main Street lending? And yet nobody even knows where to apply for that yet. Now, obviously, we're not as good as the Swiss as handling money as swiftly as they do. And yeah, it's probably gonna be from emergency declaration to businesses actually getting money, somewhere between 6 to 10 weeks, which is ridiculous and means that most employers are going to have to either furlough or lay off their employees. This is despite Jerome Powell at the Fed printing money like crazy. The money just isn't trickling down to the people who need it fast enough. But that's not the dark problem. let's now talk about the real issue. The PPP says that loans of up to $10 million are forgivable, and that the interest rate on these loans for businesses is only 1%, and that these loans are due in 2 years, but don't worry, you can defer all of your payments for 1 year. But here's the big nail in the coffin for loans like this. These loans generally require, in order for them to be forgivable, which is what we want, that's what we're expecting, that's what people think when we hear bailout, forgivable loan, they generally require that you do not reduce headcount. And as soon as you start subtracting headcount, you no longer have a forgivable loan potentially, which then you go, but wait a minute, businesses had to wait like 4 to 8 weeks to get this money. In fact, most people haven't even been able to apply for this until 28 days after the emergency declaration, which was just 2 days ago, and banks are inundated in applications. I mean, you want to see inundated? Try calling the SBA. Those people are clueless. But anyway, say you now get your money, but you've already laid off people, you now have to rehire these people and bring them back to the business, which makes sense. But wait a minute. At the same time that this forgivable loan happened, the Fed is offering unemployment benefits to most people who don't have a job right now, which means you're basically getting paid $600 per week plus state unemployment, which for a lot of people in a lot of states works out to making between $15 to $25 an hour doing absolutely nothing on unemployment, which, wait a minute, I mean, that seems good for workers, right? Well, yeah, it might be. So people who got laid off from businesses are getting protected with this unemployment. That's great. But in order for businesses who are getting these forgivable loans to actually have the loans be forgivable, people have to come back to work for these businesses, like ASAP. And so then you have to ask yourself, how many employees actually want to go back to work when you're getting paid $15 to $25 an hour doing nothing? Now, I'm not trying to be jaded here. I'm just trying to be realistic, because watch this problem that happens. If your employees don't go back to work and you're running a business and you get a loan, say you get a loan of $2 million to bring your employees back and keep the business running, but nobody wants to go back to work because people don't want to go back to work, they don't want to get sick, or because they're making more money on unemployment. Well, now all of a sudden, what happens? Well, the Paycheck Protection Program says that in order for your loan to be forgivable, you have to spend 75% of your loan on payroll, and you can't reduce the headcount that you have in terms of employees, which means all of a sudden, if people aren't coming back to your business and your headcount stays reduced because it took so long for you to actually get money from the government, guess what happens? Well, this loan no longer becomes forgivable, or at least you run into that risk, and you're gonna have to fight audits to try to make sure this loan stays forgivable. So now, it's not a matter of what the interest rate is. The fact is, you have a bunch of money that is designed to keep your business afloat, but now you're stuck between, do I use the money and risk it not being forgivable, or do I give the money back? Well, most people, most business owners, I'm guessing, are going to use the money at least to try to pay some expenses for their businesses and maybe pay their own payrolls and their own salaries. But again, if you reduced headcount, you're probably seeing a decline in sales, and now you're taking on debt to keep your business on life support, even though it's not generating any income. Which, guess what that's gonna mean down the road? Well, all of a sudden, in 2 years, this entire loan is going to be due and payable, which means you might saddle yourself up with debt right now, thinking it's going to be forgivable. But then when your employees don't wanna come back to work because the outbreak's not over, you just saddled your business with a bunch more money in debt that's totally due in 2 years, unless they extend that or you get a new loan. But banks are already tightening loans all across the country. It's hard enough to try to get a refinance right now. It's hard enough to get a mortgage. It's hard enough to get a lender to answer the phone these days. So all of a sudden you saddle a business with a bunch of debt that's due in 2 years that you say is forgivable as long as you don't reduce employee headcount, but the government is now incentivizing people not to go back to their bosses and go back to work. Basically, businesses are just taking on debt with this hope of having a lifeline and this hope that the money is going to be forgivable. And guess what's gonna happen? It's gonna lead to massive business bankruptcies in 2 years, or potentially sooner. if this system isn't either A, streamlined or fixed. And how could it be fixed? Well, look at, for example, what Germany is doing, which is so much better than this because this is dumb. This is stupid. This is setting up businesses for failure in America. That's bad. Germany, on the other hand, decided, you know what? Hey, instead of trying to put businesses through loan applications for paying payroll, let's just say, hey, everybody who stays at work will get paid 80 to 90% of whatever their salary was. Obviously, there are certain limitations, but this is good because now it's like the person who is making $8 an hour isn't all of a sudden making $15 to $25 an hour, and the person who is making $50 an hour isn't all of a sudden making $15 an hour. Instead, everybody gets a tiny little bit of haircut, people stay at work, and they get paid directly by the government, whatever the employer was supposed to pay. Now the employer isn't saddled with debt and at the risk of a future bankruptcy. But what about bigger companies? Well, we know that there's a Main Street lending program that the Fed announced, but nobody knows where to apply for that. And even still, we're expecting similar strings for mid-sized businesses as with what we're seeing with the PPP for smaller businesses. Well, what about big businesses and big bailouts like the airlines, you might ask? Well, the airlines got approved for a $50 billion bailout. Yet only $25 billion of that bailout is supposed to be a grant, AKA free money to keep these airlines afloat. Well, great, the bill passed and the airlines are like, cool, where's the $25 billion of free money? The bill has been passed for over 2 weeks now and we still don't have free money. Treasury Secretary goes, well, go ahead and put your application in because there's a moral hazard that people aren't getting their stimulus checks yet and small businesses aren't getting their toxic loans yet. Let's wait for them to get paid before you airlines get paid. So everybody's like waiting on something else to happen. And now the Treasury Department comes out and says, well, we thought we were gonna give you $25 billion in free money, but we actually want you to repay us 25% of that back. And so now the airlines are going, are you serious? This could lead us into bankruptcy. So let's just take a moment to try to put all these pieces of the puzzle together. Oh wait, we can't, because it's a massive cluster F. There is so much money being printed by the government, yet we're trying to make trickle-down economics happen overnight, yet it's not happening. And so what does that mean? It means a lot of us are sitting around collecting unemployment, waiting for our stimulus check, not sure what's gonna happen to our car payment, our mortgage payments, our preschools are going bankrupt, our local restaurants are going bankrupt, the local sign shop's going bankrupt. And you know what? When we hear bankruptcy, we think, oh my gosh, this is terrible, and it is. But you know what? Bankruptcy might be the reality because guess what bankruptcy does? It makes everything stop. It puts a freeze on everything. It just stops the madness. Why is AMC probably going to file for bankruptcy? Because it stops the madness. It automatically forces all payments to stay or stop, generally. Which honestly is probably what should have been done by our government 30 days ago. So that way our country would have had more certainty. So what do? Like, we know we can't put the pieces of this disaster together. But what are we supposed to be doing with our money right now? Well, if you have money to invest or you have a business, first things first, make sure that your family has money to survive. You got food and you figure out how to negotiate a solid forbearance deal with either your landlord or your mortgage lender. That is the top priority. Also figure out how to stop making payments if you need to on your car. So minimize your outlays. Get on the phone and sit on the phone for as long as it takes. Make sure you apply for unemployment if you're unemployed and buckle up. Yeah, I want to spend money on stocks and real estate and invest on red days. But every time I look deeper and deeper into the crap that's happening, I see more and more problems and more risks of business bankruptcies not happening tomorrow. But when all these dumb, toxic bailout loans come due that are supposed to be forgivable, but they're just gonna end up being loopholes, well, you fired people, you put one person on unemployment, therefore we're not gonna forgive all that. We're just gonna keep seeing more and more bankruptcies until we have more clarity and this crap gets solved. So yeah, it does make me nervous. I do wanna keep buying on red days. And I'm sorry to kind of vomit this information and all this sort of drama, but it is what it is. And I don't think enough of us are paying attention to the real bankruptcy risk that could be happening with small to medium to even large size businesses. Because the trickle down money, even though it's being printed, a lot of people just ain't seeing it yet. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Get your quote for life insurance in the link below. Get your 2 free stocks with the link below. Use the coupon code to join my investing course, so that way when we're finally through all this crap, you'll be fully educated and ready to go buy some deals. Thanks so much again for watching, and until next time.